Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and to another sew along video. I hope you're all well and you're having a good week. In my most recent video where I shared some sewing plans for autumn and new fabrics and a new pattern, I asked if anything that I shared would be interesting for me to record as a sew along, and lots of people asked if I would record the Wren pattern by chalk and notch as a sew along. So I have some time today and I thought I'd start this pattern and give it a try and just record it as a sew along so that it might be helpful for anyone else that's thinking of trying this pattern maybe for autumn and winter time. So as always, if you are new to my channel, I'd love you to consider subscribing. I post lots of sew alongs, lots of sewing content, fabric chat, things I've been making and things like that. And if you're into sewing and knitting and making too, I'd love you to subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And I always love to hear from you in the comments as well. Just in case you're interested in what I'm wearing today I'm wearing my Megan Nielsen Jara sweatshirt in this lovely Atelier Brunette sweatshirt in fabric, which I'm actually a little bit hot in at the moment. It's that kind of weather in September where it's freezing in the morning when we're walking to school, but then it always warms up later in the day, so it's really hard to know what to wear at the moment. But yeah, at the moment that's what I'm wearing. I may need to change later. So this is what I'm planning to sew up today, or to at least start sewing up today, because I am starting right from scratch with this one. I haven't traced out the pattern or cut it out or anything yet, so I'll see how far I get. But yeah, I thought it might be helpful just to record some of the process and chat through how I found the pattern and everything. So this is the Wren pattern, and I'm going to make version A, which is the blouse, which you can see here. And I'll just show you the line drawings on the back again. So I'm going to make this blouse here. It's a cropped blouse which comes to above hip length, I believe, and then it's just got a button down front and some lovely puffy sleeves as well. So I was a little bit confused as to which size to make for this pattern, because it says to go with the full bust measurement, and that puts me at a size 0. I'm a full bust measurement of a 32 inch. But then the waist for a size 0 is 25 and the hips are 35, and I'm larger in those measurements than the pattern gives there. But I think for the blouse at least I'm going to be okay going for a size 0, because the finished garment measurements do give an ease of 10 centimetres around the bust and hips, and as the blouse finishes above the hips anyway, I don't think I need to take into account my hip measurement for the blouse anyway. So I think I'm going to go with a size 0 and hope for the best. And I think I'll be okay with that, especially because, as I say, there is some ease in the pattern, and there's also some optional darts in the back as well, which I'm not going to do. So obviously not including the back darts will give me a little bit more ease in the finished garment. So I hope I'm going to be okay going with a size 32. I actually haven't traced out the pattern or anything yet, and the pattern actually comes on this kind of proper, I want to call it proper pattern paper, you know, the really old-fashioned kind of paper. And this is an absolute nightmare to trace off if you've ever tried it before. So I'm thinking that I might actually cut straight into the pattern for this one, and I just hope that's going to be okay because of the ease in the garment, because the lines are quite straight and everything. I think if I need to make any alterations or if I need to make anything bigger, hopefully I'll be able to do that quite easily, even if I have cut straight into my pattern. I don't think I'll be making this for anyone else. So as long as I cut it to my own size, I should be okay, hopefully. But yeah, I do really like this pattern paper to use, but when it comes to tracing out, it is really, really hard to trace out. If anyone has any tips for tracing this kind of pattern paper, then please do let me know in the comments. But I think for this time, yeah, I'm going to be naughty and cut straight into my pattern and hope for the best. And this is a lovely fabric that I'll be using to make for my blouse, and this is a really lovely cotton seersucker fabric from Stuff and Still. I bought this earlier in the summer and I never got around to making anything up with it. I originally thought I might make a sagebrush top with it, but then when this pattern came out and I bought it, I thought it would be really well suited to the blouse pattern of the Wren pattern. So yeah, that's what I'm going to use. It needs a bit of an iron. I wasn't sure about ironing this fabric. It's kind of like double gauze because it's got that bubbly texture to it, but I think it will definitely need a little bit of an iron. And I just hope I won't iron out the seersucker crinkliness of the fabric too much. So I'm going to cut out my pattern, and then I'm going to get my pattern pieces all cut out and everything. So I'll film some of that and let you know how I get on. I read recently online that you can actually iron this kind of thin pattern paper. So this time I gave it a go and I ironed my pattern paper before I cut out on a really low iron setting. And it did help a bit just to get rid of all of those creases that you get in this kind of thin pattern paper where it's been packed in the pattern envelope. So yeah, I've ironed all of my pattern papers and I'm just going to cut out my pieces now. I did think there were loads of pattern pieces at first, but actually because in this pattern you actually get 2 bust size options. So there's an A and B cup part of the pattern for each size, and then there's a C and D cup. So that's really helpful. It did say that if your bust measurement works out any larger than that, then you may need to do a full bust adjustment. That's a mouthful. But yeah, I thought that was really helpful, and it's the first pattern I've used actually that does have that different bust cup option. So yeah, it should be really good for getting a good fit to your garment. So actually there's not too many pieces to this pattern. The sleeve actually comes in 2 parts, so you get an upper sleeve and a lower sleeve, and then there's actually a facing where you do the elastic for the puffy sleeves. So that's different as well. So I'm really looking forward to having a go at putting this pattern together and see how it works out. So this is the way that I tend to mark darts. I make a little snip at the bottom of the dart at each point, and then I place a pin in the point of the dart, which I then remove the pattern piece or the paper piece, and I mark the pin point with a fabric pen. And then I use my ruler and my chalk pen just to join up the line of the notch of the dart and the dart point, just to make those lines straight. And I find that the easiest and quickest way to mark my darts. You can obviously do it in other ways like carbon paper and things like that, but I find this the easiest way. Okay, so I'm back after my mammoth cutting out session and cut out all of my pattern pieces, including the pieces for the dress for whenever I ever get around to making that. And I've interfaced all of my pieces that need to be interfaced. I wasn't quite sure whether to use interfacing at first because I think I've mentioned before that I don't always like the way that it feels, but because this is my first attempt at this pattern, I thought I would use interfacing this time. And actually for the centre fronts and the button plackets and things, you actually just attach a strip of interfacing to the front pieces. So obviously for this time I have used interfacing for the button plackets just to give that extra bit of strength for the buttonholes when I come to making those. So yeah, everything's all cut out and ready to go, so on to the sewing. So I'm all set up now on my little dining room table sewing setup, which you will have seen before if you've watched any of my previous sew-alongs. So I've done a couple of the boring bits. I've done the stay stitching around the neckline pieces, and I've done my darts on the centre fronts down there like that, and I've just pressed them down. And I've just put the interfacing along the centre front there as well. So yeah, I'm really enjoying working with this fabric. Actually, it's really nice once in a while to work with the cotton. I don't use cotton very much actually because I don't often enjoy wearing it, but I think this will be a really nice one. It's lovely and soft and it's really nice to work with. So yeah, I think next I'm on to sewing the shoulder seam, and then I'm on to doing the facing and attaching that. So I'll just film a bit of the sewing and chat to you about the make as I'm going along. The pattern suggests that you sew a fold guide around the edge of the facing. So you sew a line of stitching which is just under 1 centimetre, and that just gives you a guide of how much to turn under for the facing. I'm not sure if I could have just overlocked the edge of this facing piece or not, but I thought since this is my first time, I will do it exactly as the pattern suggests, and then maybe when I make it another time, it might be that I could just overlock the edge if I'm not too fussy about how my facing is finished. I've got a bit of a funny bit of my facing actually, where I must have missed a bit of the fabric on the interfacing, so I need to try and hide that when I turn it under. So yeah, that's a bit weird, I don't know how that happens. So I'm going to go and press under that 1 centimetre seam allowance now, and then see what's next. So there's my seam all folded up and pressed. It's quite hard to press that flat when it's such a rounded curve, but I've got there in the end. So as I say, I'm not sure if next time it would be okay just to overlock that. And I've pinned the facing to the edge of the neckline now. So the neckline facing just finishes a little bit before the button placket, and then I guess you kind of fold in the button placket so that it covers the edge of the facing. So I'm just going to sew on my facing now. Oh my goodness, I just got so confused trying to work out how to attach the facing and the button placket, and I still cannot for the life of me work out what the pattern is trying to get me to do. So I've attached my facing slightly differently to what the pattern says, and I've sewn on my facing, the neckline facing, as you normally would a facing. And then I've just folded back my button placket. There is a way in the instructions that gets you to do that without having this kind of gap here. But at the moment, my brain is a bit fuzzled and I can't quite work out how it's telling me to do that. I've tried it a couple of times and it's not been right. So I've gone with my own way for now. So just to let you know, if you are planning to make this, my version is not done the way of the pattern when it comes to the facing and the button placket. Hopefully it'll still look neat enough, but yeah, I'm going to have a look at that and come back to it another day, because at the moment I just can't get my head around it. It's probably something really simple, but it's just one of those things I can't quite work out at the moment. So for the sake of getting this done today, and because I think this will still look okay, I'm just going to sew or top stitch around the placket. So you go right up the placket and then all around the neckline and then down the other side, so you've got a nice top stitched facing and button placket. So I'm just going to do that now. So I now have a really nice top stitched button placket and neckline, which is all twisted up. You might have seen from the video there where I was sewing that I did that from the inside, and the pattern does actually tell you to do that because then you can easily catch in the pressed under edge of the neck facing, and that's obviously why you needed to have that edge pressed under. I guess you could overlock it if you weren't too bothered about the insides. It has actually made it quite bulky because obviously you're pressing under two pieces of interfaced cotton, so that seam there is quite bulky. Maybe next time if I use a cotton again I might not interface it, I don't know. But yeah, that's all done now. So you can see here, this is what I've done wrong. The bit of the button placket is open at the top there, so I'm just going to have to hand stitch that closed as neatly as I can so that that doesn't show. But obviously if I'd have worked out the way that the pattern was telling me to do it, that would have all been enclosed nicely and I wouldn't have had that. So next time I'm going to try and work out how to do it properly, but I think for this time that will be okay. So next job is to gather the sleeve heads. So this is the upper sleeve. It's quite short, it's a little cap sleeve and it's puffy, so there's quite a lot of gather in the top of the sleeve. So we need to run two rows of gathering stitches across the top there, and then the pattern has you attach the sleeve on the flat and then sew up the side seams and underarms. So that's interesting and a little bit different. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do now. Oh my, I don't think today is my sewing day. Everything is going wrong. So there was my mistake with the facing, and then I came to tack in the sleeves. So the sleeves are done on the flat, so you gather in the sleeve head and you sew it on the flat like that, and I could not make either of my sleeves fit in properly. I've had to do it my own way. I'm not sure if it's the pattern, but I'm going to say today it's probably me. I've probably done something wrong, but I got there eventually. So I've sewn in my sleeves now, I've sewn them on the flat. While I was doing that, I managed to tack in my sleeve head rather than actually sew it, and then pull out all the tacking threads so that I had to regather and sew my sleeve head in again. And then while I was finished sewing the sleeve heads in, I went to overlock my seams and managed to go over a pin. So then I had to rethread my overlocker again because obviously I wasn't very happy with that. So I think I'm gonna give up for today. So I've put my sleeves in on the flat, so you can see hopefully there's a little gathered sleeve there, and that's where I'm at. So I'm just going to put this away now and leave it, and hopefully come back to it another day where I'll feel a bit fresher and hopefully it's ready to start again with it. But sometimes people do say to me, do I ever have any sewing horrors? And yes, today is definitely one of those. They do happen all the time. They happen to all of us, don't they? So today is just a bad sewing day. It's just one of those days where everything has gone wrong. So yeah, I'll leave it for today and I'll come back to it another day. Good morning. So it's a new day now. I left the blouse as it was the other day and just walked away from it. And something really weird happened. So the next day, I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and all of a sudden realised how I should have attached that facing. It's really funny because I didn't feel as though I was thinking about it in the evening or at night or anything, but obviously at the back of my mind was obviously still trying to work out how to do that facing. And I woke up the next morning and it suddenly kind of dawned on me how I needed to attach that facing. So yeah, very odd. I'm sure that's probably happened to all of us in the past, because I think if you're a sewer, you're probably always in the back of your mind thinking about how to do things. And it really bugs me if I can't work something like that out. I know I sounded as though I was ready to kind of just do it my own way the other day, but in the back of my mind, it was really bugging me that I couldn't work out that piece of the pattern. So last night I just sat and unpicked all of my top stitching around the facing and around the button plackets, and I'm going to try and explain now as best as I can and show to the camera how I should have attached it. So I still think I've done a little bit of this wrong. I don't think I should have actually sewn in the facing first, but since I'd already clipped my curves and everything, I didn't bother to unpick the facing around the neckline. But I think you shouldn't actually sew that in first. I think what you should do is get the straight edges of your facing and then the straight edges of the centre front button band. And even though the facing is shorter than the edge of the blouse, you need to put them together and sew a little seam down the side there. So you're basically sewing the edge of your facing to the edge of your button band, and then you'll have an extra little flap like this at the edge, because obviously the facing is shorter than the front of the blouse. And then so you sew that together, and then you have a seam there, and then you press that towards the blouse and you have this flap here. So then if you hadn't already sewn on your facing like I have here, you would then sew all around the neckline, attaching your facing to the neckline, and then you'd have this kind of pocket of button band which you can then fold inside out. I've just tacked this because I wanted to see if what I was imagining was actually work. So when you turn that inside out, you get this, and everything is all really neatly enclosed. I really hope that makes sense, because obviously it's a bit of a difficult thing for me to show like this. But I'm going to sew that now, and I'm going to finish my top stitching again and just see how that works out. So yeah, I'm so pleased that I managed to work that out now, because as I say, it was doing my head in. But the other day, one of those days where I knew really that I should have just stopped, and it's really funny because I was watching back some of the footage from the other day and editing some of it, and I could just see how I looked more and more tired as the video went on, and I was just thinking I should have just stopped. I always feel as though if I cut and sew on the same day, that's never a good thing. It's a bit too much, so I always try to cut on the day before or something and then sew the next day. So I think I was just trying to do too much in one day and I should have just stopped, but I tried to carry on and it was a disaster. So I'm hoping for a better day today. Okay, so I have top stitched all around my facing now and my button placket, and the facing is attached properly. Yay, it looks so much neater now. I'm so pleased that I managed to work that out. I just feel so much better for that. It's silly, but you probably know what I mean. So I've also done the side seams and I've sewn the sleeve underarm seams as well. So now I have something that's beginning to resemble a blouse, and I absolutely love this fabric so much. It's so pretty. I'm just wondering about buttons actually when I come to that stage, and I think I might actually do self-covered buttons because I think they'll look really nice. So next I'm on to doing the lower part of the sleeve. So there's a lower part of the sleeve that's attached to the bottom of this little cap sleeve, and then there's a facing that I need to thread the elastic through. So that's what I'm going to do now, so I'll just film a bit of that. So these are the little elastic sleeve casings that I'm sewing here. So the pattern has you press up a seam allowance of 1 centimetre all around the edge, and then you sew together the side seams into a circle, and then you attach it onto the lower sleeve part of the sleeve. So that's what I'm going to do now. So my puffy sleeves are all done now. You can see the elastic in the bottom there, and how lovely and puffy that is. I really like this sleeve actually. So yeah, all there is to do now actually is just hem the blouse. So I'm going to try it on and just see where I want it hemmed, and then I need to do the buttonholes, and then that's it. I just need to find myself some buttons. I'm just wondering, as I say, whether to do self-covered buttons or find some really nice white buttons, because I think they would look really nice as well. So yeah, I just need to decide on that one. So that's what I'm going to do now, and I'm nearly done. So here I am in my finished blouse, and I have to say I really love it now. I'm so glad I stuck with it, because there was times there where I could have just thrown it out the window. I have to say I did wonder as I was going through this video whether to completely cut out the bit where everything went wrong, because I did wonder if people would want to see that. But then I decided to leave it in, because I thought, no, I need to be real about this. Everyone has bad days, everyone has bad sewing days, and it's good to leave those things in, I think, because then it keeps it real for people, and sometimes I think it's easy to look at other people's makes and think that they never have any mistakes, or obviously what I show on YouTube and on Instagram is often the things that have gone well and the things that I'm proud of and the things that I want to show off, but there's plenty of mistakes and bad days and things that go wrong in the background as well. So yeah, in the end I thought, no, I must leave it all in, and I hope that's going to be helpful to anyone else that has those bad days as well. But yeah, I absolutely love it now. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. So just a little kind of overview or review of how I found the pattern in the end. It's a really lovely pattern. I would say that there are a couple of things in there that could be a bit stumping if you're a beginner. So obviously with me it was the facing, and I went back over the instructions, and I have to say that I think the way that I worked it out again was based on things that I'd made in the past rather than being able to understand the instructions properly. So I'm not saying that the instructions are bad at all, but I just think there's a little bit of interpretation there maybe, and it's not necessarily, if you're used to kind of tilling the buttons, hold your hand every step of the way patterns, then this one might be a little bit more difficult to follow, but that might have been just me. And if you have made this pattern before, let me know how you found the instructions in the comments below. Something that I forgot to mention that I tend to do when I cut out my paper pattern pieces, and actually my fabric as well, is that I'll often cut out the length of my bodice pieces to the largest size of the garment measurement, so if that makes sense. So instead of cutting the hemline where my size directed you to cut the hemline, I actually cut it at the line for the largest size, just to give me a bit of extra length there, just because this was the first time I'd made this pattern and I did worry it was going to come up a little bit too short, so I made it longer so that I could then chop a bit off if I needed to, and actually I did need to in the end, so I'll just stand up and show you the length of mine. So you can see that it kind of finishes at mid-hip, so I think that's slightly longer than it should have been, than the pattern suggests. I think the pattern probably would have had it come up maybe just to fall on your hips there, which would have been fine, but I wanted it long enough to tuck in. So I've got it tucked out at the moment with a pair of jeans, but I do think it would be really nice tucked in as well. So I'll try and get a couple of photos of it tucked in and tucked out so that you can see what it looks like. I absolutely love this fabric. It was just so lovely to work with. It was really easy. I did wonder if it might be a bit difficult with the sort of bumpy seersucker texture, but actually it was really lovely to work with and it feels lovely on. So I've mentioned before that sometimes I don't like to wear cotton, but this one does feel really soft and really lovely to wear. So yeah, really happy with that. Obviously, because my fabric's quite structured, I have got very puffy sleeves here, which I actually really like, and I think it really shows off the gather. So yeah, that's something to note when you're choosing your fabric for this pattern. Just be aware that obviously if you use a more structured fabric like I have, you're going to get some very puffy details like the sleeves and things, but obviously if I went for a more drapey viscose or something, then I probably wouldn't get as much puffiness and they would drape a little bit more. So there is this really lovely kind of upper and lower sleeve detail to this pattern, which you're probably not going to be able to see on this busy fabric. But yeah, it's a really nice detail. The only thing I'd say about this is that if you're using a kind of print fabric like I have, you do end up with a bit of a funny line. Obviously there's a seam line there which wouldn't normally be there. I wondered if that would notice a little bit, but actually it doesn't, because obviously it's a very kind of busy fabric, lots of colours going on, so it doesn't really notice. But I did think that if you wanted to, you could kind of have fun doing some colour blocking. If you were making like a plain blouse, you could put some contrast details around the arms and the cuffs and things, so you could have like a white bodice and then a navy bottom of your sleeve, and that might look really nice. So yeah, lots of options and variations and things you could do with this pattern. Just a couple of things that I did slightly differently to what the pattern suggested. So the pattern does suggest that you join your upper and lower sleeves with a French seam, but I actually didn't bother with that this time. I simply sewed them together normally and then I overlocked the seam inside. And that was just because I have a bit of a fear of bulk and because this fabric is a little bit more kind of heavy, I was a bit worried that my seam as a French seam would be a little bit bulky. It probably wouldn't have been, I don't know, but that's just how I was feeling about this. Next time if I use a more drapey fabric, I'll definitely have a go at the French seam because I think that would finish it really nicely. And that's something to say about this pattern actually. It does actually have you finish everything really nicely. So obviously the bodice facing is done really nicely. You can't see any overlocking there if you do it properly. And the hem's obviously turned up so that you don't see any overlocking if you don't want to. And then because of this facing for the elastic, you don't even see any overlocking or anything there. It's all done really nicely. I really hope you've enjoyed this sew along. I hope it's been helpful. I'd welcome any feedback on my sew along videos, because sometimes it's quite hard to know how much to include, how much sewing to include, how much of the cutting out to include, or whether I should include more of things. It's quite hard to get the balance right of including too much and boring people or not including enough. So do let me know in the comments below if there's anything you'd like to see more or less of in my sew alongs, or anything that I could do better to help with those. I'd love to know in the comments what you think of this blouse, and any questions you have about the pattern that I haven't answered in my review or my sew along as I've gone along, then do let me know and I'll do my best to answer them in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please do give the video a like if you've enjoyed it. I'd really appreciate that, and I'll be back soon with another video and I'll look forward to seeing you then. Bye!